From Chicago's CAN TV, this is Chicago Newsroom.
Well, hi there, and welcome to Chicago Newsroom here on CAN TV. I'm Ken Davis for what has turned out to be the final edition of Chicago Newsroom. And we're going out on a pretty high note because our special guest on the show today, well, I guess we're her special guest because Lori Lightfoot invited us to go over to her office at the City Hall and to talk with her for about a half an hour about the first week or so on her job. And we're very, very pleased and honored about that. A little bit later on, we're going to be talking with two people from the Daily Line, two of our favorite reporters in town, A.D. Quigg and Heather Sharon. And beyond that, we'll have a little talk with John Dempsey from WLS Radio, who's one of our old friends, and our producer, Dave Resnick, is going to stop by for a few minutes, too. So right now, without further ado, Mayor Lori Lightfoot on Chicago Newsroom. It's Chicago Newsroom here on CAN TV. I'm Ken Davis, and what a way to end. We have a special guest today who, let's face it, just needs no introduction. I'm so happy to have you here, Mayor Lori Lightfoot.
My pleasure.
You know, we talked to you so many times on Chicago Newsroom through the last couple of years as you were with the Police Accountability Task Force and, you know, the police board and so many other things. And, you know, the thing that I've wanted, I always thought if I ever got to ask you another question again, it would be, how the heck does it feel? I mean, what was it like to walk up to the podium yesterday at City Council for the first time and chair that and stand at the big podium? What did you feel like?
Well, you know, you of course had a little bit of nerves, although we had, you know, made sure that we had things understood from a procedural standpoint. There's a lot of technical parliamentary procedural issues, but it felt pretty awesome. I mean, just looking out into the gallery, looking to the people, some people who I recognize from other public hearings that I've chaired over the years. But it was clearly a very big moment, and I wanted to make sure that we did well, that we were able to take care of our business in an expeditious fashion. But it is strange still when I walk around and I see a photograph of the mayor and it happens to be me. Or, I am a news junkie, so I look at several blogs in the morning. And one day last week, I looked at the very bottom of the blog and it said, you know, where's JB? And then the next thing under that was like, where's Lori? And I'm like, wait a minute, that's me.
She accomplished, right? Yeah.
Exactly.
Right, yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah, and the first time I saw that too, it was like, wow, that. I guess the reason that I'm so interested in this is that unlike others who've ascended to this job, you spent the last couple of years leading community meetings. I mean, the PATF stuff and so many other, well, the hearings on the federal probe and everything. So you're coming in with a constituency that sees you as something other than mayors in the past, who they've just kind of seen as these kind of obscure political figures. There are so many people in Chicago who feel like they've gotten to know you, I mean, met you personally over the last couple of years. So it's, I don't know, it just feels like a different dynamic to me somehow.
It does feel like a different dynamic for me as well. And my experience with people everywhere, whether it's some kind of formal meeting like I had last night or just going to the grocery store, I am feeling a level of hope and optimism that I haven't seen in the city in quite a long time. And I just want to make sure that every day I'm working hard to be worthy of the hope that people and the optimism that people have for this moment of change. It is daunting, but it's also exhilarating at the same time. I'm very enthusiastic about really digging down deep and solving problems. And I still keep hearing from people, and I suppose I'll hear it for the foreseeable future. Well, this is the way we've always done it. I'm like, okay, but does it make sense? Why do we do it this way? Does it actually serve the issue, the interest, the people that we are sworn to be working hard for every single day? So kind of pushing the norms and challenging the status quo, that's exciting to me.
Did you even know when you went to sleep on election night that you were going to pick up every single ward?
No.
You found that out the next day like the rest of us, I guess, huh?
Yeah, we had done our polling and we had known for quite a long time that victory seemed certain, but You know, I'm a cautious trial lawyer, so I leave nothing behind. But picking up every ward was something that we certainly didn't anticipate. I mean, that was such an incredible gift from the voters of the city. It was just awesome to feel that. You know, I didn't go to bed for a long time that night, so I did find out that night. But no, it was magical and exhilarating and surreal, and you know, all the other adjectives that you can imagine to say, wow, something incredible just happened.
So I'll get off of this in a minute, but I'm just obsessing on this. I have been for a while. So there was a moment when you could feel that there was some kind of like a psychic shift in the energy of the city toward you. Was it the TV commercial with Vivian playing the trumpet or something, or what was
No,
it?
I actually think it was sooner than that. Probably 2 weeks out from the February 26th election, we really started feeling this pull. Our calls for volunteers were answered and way exceeded expectations. Our efforts in the field were just bearing fruit. You know, we were reaching out to try to persuade and said, oh, don't worry, I already voted, I'm supporting her. So we were feeling this momentum, still didn't know what that looked like, and at that point we were still kind of this ragtag insurgent, but we definitely felt like something was moving in our direction. And then, you know, not only winning on February 26th, but coming out on top of that large field, that was really kind of the galvanizing moment where we knew we were on the cusp of something really special and important. And our early polling right after February 26th showed us, I will tell you that when the pollster came to me and gave me the number, I said to him, I don't believe you.
You're fired.
I don't believe it, and we're not going to tell anybody, because it was just a magnitude.
We're not going to tell anybody.
No, I just felt like no one would believe us because the spread was so large in our favor, and it turned out he was right. Well, it turned out he was wrong because he underestimated actually what the spread was going to be.
I know from just the last last 6 weeks or so of going to events like the ACLU, there was a forum there, and there just felt like some kind of a weird thing that was happening where you would make a comment and people would just kind of spontaneously applaud. And that was when I started thinking, you know, there really is something happening here. But anyway, so moving to the current day, we have the city council, and obviously, it's been well reported this morning from yesterday that you had a spectacular day. You got your reorganization through on a voice vote. You know enough about us to know that we're obsessed with the media on our show. We really like to talk about news and journalism and so forth. I couldn't help but notice that when you were in D.C. for that 3 days or whatever it was, that everyone was enjoying talking to all the aldermen who were saying, this administration has essentially already failed. I mean, she doesn't know how to talk to us. She can't possibly deal with us. She's off talking with Ivanka or something, and she's wasting all this time when she should be organizing the council. Well, it kind of didn't work out that way.
Yeah.
Was there a question there? I don't know.
You know, look, you know as well as I do that there are certain people who like to see their name in print, and although a lot of those comments were, you know, anonymous sources from the city council. Look, we were engaging with them on a regular basis. We were very methodical in the way that we were doing our work. I wanted to understand the structure of city council. I wanted to understand the committees, what their mission was. I looked at data about how many times they met, what they met about. Were they just passing resolutions, or were they actually doing substantive work? Looked at the budgets, looked at whether or not they met the budgets. We analyzed data about, well, who were the employees, how much were they getting paid? So all of that work was being done at the same time that we were engaging folks. Now, you know, what the complaint really was is she's not calling me and meeting with me and giving me the spoils of government. That's really what a lot of those criticisms boiled down to. So be it. I'm a different kind of person, and the freedom that I have, having not come up through the democratic machine, is that I can do things my way because I am only beholden to the voters. I'm not beholden to any special interest. And so we're pushing people out of their comfort zone, and they don't like that, but welcome to the party.
Yeah, I was going to say, even as recently as a week ago, there were speculations in the press that you'd never be able to get Weggis back into finance, that Tom Tunney and you know, others, there were a number of people who wanted the job, and that there was going to be 25 votes, maybe 26 votes or something like that. So when did you know that this was going to all go through? It was going to be just fine?
Well, look, you never know till you know, right? And I don't take anything for granted. But we've been working really, really hard over many weeks to make sure that we were listening to people, that we were reaching out, that we were getting ourselves prepared. And you know, it certainly could have been if somebody had the wherewithal to put together an actual alternative slate, as opposed to, you know, to kick up a little bit of dust as happened at the council meeting. But we felt pretty confident really last week going into it, you know, but that's as a result of the hard work of our floor leader, other allies in the city council, and a really, really good team that we put together to manage relationships with city council.
So no council wars for you, apparently?
You know, look, I don't want a rubber stamp city council. And I hope that what you see on the council floor is a result of a collaborative process, not dictatorial, top down, but a collaborative process. And there are going to be things that we agree on, things that we don't agree on. There's a bunch of things that were dropped yesterday by aldermen, and I haven't had a full readout, but there's some things that I'm not going to agree with. There's some things that I support. But that's part of the democratic process.
Put in the hopper for,
yes, exactly, for future consideration. So, but that's part of the democratic process. And people in the city are sick and tired of the status quo. They feel like the city council is kabuki theater. Everything's pre-baked. That doesn't add to the legitimacy of government. We have a lot of tough choices that we're going to have to face in the coming months, particularly around municipal finance. We're not going to get the support of residents and voters if we don't demonstrate to them that the government is legitimate. I expect that there's going to be criminal charges brought, perhaps against some new people, names that haven't really been out there. We have to have a government that stands for legitimacy and integrity. That's the only way we're going to be able to weather these storms.
The committee structure is something that you wanted. You got it exactly the way you wanted it. And that, of course, raises this whole, you know, it could be a whole long discussion about the thing about aldermanic prerogative and the organization of the city council. You've advocated that the city council should organize itself, but then it ended up being your organization that they passed. So,
well, but let me push back on it a little bit, right? I meant what I said before about collaboration, right? I didn't come into office with this grand plan of here's what we're going to do, and then I sold it or I shoved it down the throats. Right. The plan that passed and the organization that passed yesterday was the result of a lot of discussions and back and forth with city council members, asking them. I met with a number of them. Those meetings, one-on-one meetings, are going to continue. What are their interests in their wards? What are the things that can be helpful to them? So it was a collaborative process. It gets, you know, it went through, you know, with the pounding of a gavel by me. But that was a collaborative process. I want that to be very clear.
I'd like to talk a little bit about police. I mean, obviously, this is how you became well known in the public, is with your police reform efforts. Carlos Ramirez Rosa apparently is talking about wanting to reintroduce the CPAC. I always get them confused, but he wants to reintroduce CPAC, and you, of course, are in favor of GAPA. You are planning on introducing the Grassroots Alliance proposal. So you're kind of at odds with each other, but the thing that I find most remarkable about it is that until you were elected, neither of those proposals could even make it to the floor for discussion. There were alternatives brought up by the previous administration. So what's exciting about this is that there's a potential for there to be a real conversation about the difference between these two fairly significant proposals, and maybe there will be some compromise will come out of that.
Well, I think that what's important, a lot of these things about civilian oversight, whether it's an elected school board or civilian oversight of the police, are born of a lack of confidence in the prior administration's handling of these matters. And I think that we have to have a conversation, to be sure, about what that would look like. What are the objectives that we have here? You know, just did an interview with a student at the Jones College Prep newspaper. She brought up the issue of an elected school board, and there was a bill that passed out of the House, sponsored by Representative Martwick, that called for a 21-member board. And this was obviously something that was hashed out and supported by CTU. There may have been other organizations, but it's really a CTU-driven vehicle. And she said, well, you know, you said this, but you opposed this, and why? And there's a lot of reasons why, but I want to make sure that in all of this, we are focused on what's the objective, what's the mission, and how do we best get there.
Right.
And when it comes to oversight of the police, we shouldn't fear that. It's been in existence, for example, in Los Angeles for a long time, but the devil is always in the details. And I want to make sure that our police department has the tools and the resources it needs to be successful. And success to me is protecting the safety of every resident of the city. But I also want to make sure there's a measure of accountability. And I'm holding them accountable in very specific ways, and new ways that they haven't experienced before because of my knowledge and experience. But when you talk about a $2 billion plus organization, and of course that doesn't count the settlements and judgments and attorney's fees, when you talk about an organization that literally touches every resident on a daily, if not weekly, on a weekly, if not daily basis, millions of touches every single year, they've got to be accountable to the residents of the city. So that to me is the concept that we need to be focused on and embody when we think about civilian oversight. We have to do it in a way that sets up the body for success, that has a measure of accountability, that we're getting people into those seats that actually have the requisite experience and expertise to be able to perform meaningful oversight, so it's not perfunctory. But let's have that debate.
Of course, this brings up the issue of the police union and Kevin Graham, and you were not terribly easy on him at the City Club of Chicago when you were there a couple days ago, and you said that he has a real problem focusing on yes, getting to yes. He's always talking, he's always saying no about things, and you raised, I think, some very interesting points about the fact that if we could work together, we might be able to get mental health issues for police who are you know, facing a lot of problems. But you seem so incredibly far apart at this point. How in the world are you going to be able to bridge that gap and come to a police contract? Well,
we'll ultimately come to a contract because we have to, right? But the notion that the FOP is going to live in this fantasy world where they are absolutely adamantly against anything that looks like reform, even when it's in the best interest of their members, that's not going to be a reality that's going to exist in at least as long as I'm mayor of the city. I'd love for them to partner with us. I think there's a lot of things that we actually could agree on. Officer wellness was one of the things that I talked about the other day. But there's not going to be a lot of space for that if the reflex constantly is no, no, no. And an attitude of entitlement. They're entitled to do their job, to serve and protect, to live out the oath that they've sworn. Everything else beyond that, we will definitely deal with at the bargaining table. But you know, there were rumors floating around about, and I didn't verify this, but rumors floating around that they were telling their officers, don't do anything. Don't over Memorial Day weekend. Don't intercede. If you see some criminal activity, just lay back, do nothing. I hope to God that wasn't true, because man, oh man, if that happened, there's going to be a reckoning.
Do you have any reason to believe that that happened?
Well, it happened 2 years ago, in almost 3 years ago, leading into Labor Day in 2016, when we had this catastrophic level of violence. The then administration, which there are some carryovers from that, put out a memo telling officers that they should not show up for work, that they shouldn't do their job, that they shouldn't be the police. I thought it was an absolutely outrageous thing. That Rahm Emanuel said nothing about it. I was livid when I saw it. And again, it was documented. I think they weren't foolish enough to put something like that out in writing. But God forbid, we're going to say to officers that when they see criminal activity, they should lay back as some stunt? That's outrageous.
Can you talk to us a little bit about again, at the personal level, what you saw and felt on the Memorial Day weekend? I mean, this was a big moment for you. You really wanted to make a kind of a public statement of who you are and where you are. And I'm sure there were successes, but at least the headlines are numbers didn't go down, the numbers are the same.
Well, the numbers weren't exactly the same. We were actually ahead on homicides, but we were up on shootings. We were up on gun collections. But you know, we're nibbling around the edges. It was not a good weekend. We could have absolutely done better than what we did. And I made that very clear to the superintendent and his team. There were just mistakes that were made, which are unacceptable. Mistakes that cost people's lives, mistakes that led to injuries and death. We can't have that. And I made that very, very clear. I'm not going to micromanage the police department, but I am going to hold them accountable.
Are you finding that the police brass is accepting of you, or are you feeling some recalcitrance there?
You know, it doesn't really matter if they're accepting to me or not.
True.
I'm the mayor. I'm their boss, and I'm going to hold them accountable. So whatever they say to me in my face, whatever they think personally, really is irrelevant. The point is, they need to do their jobs to keep people safe in the city, and I'm going to hold them accountable in that. You know, what I saw was, you know, what I know and what you know, which is there's a huge level of disparity and inequity across our city. I'll give you an example. I was on North Avenue Beach with the superintendent. North Avenue Beach is like Hollywood, right? It's like Disneyland. There's hot and cold running everything. And then an hour later, I was down at Rainbow Beach. And it was night and day difference. The lack of amenities, the lack of investment, the lack of people. North Avenue, even though it wasn't a spectacularly warm day, was pretty crowded. When I went to Rainbow Beach, maybe 10 people on the beach, maybe, but no amenities whatsoever. Investments in that area are absolutely unacceptably low. I made that very clear to Mike Kelly, the head of the Park District. We've got to do better by our people. We've got to show people in every neighborhood that they matter, and that they matter because we're making investments in them.
Well, we're making an investment in a golf course on the south side.
Maybe. We'll see about that.
We'll see about that. We have just a couple of minutes left, and there's so many things I want to cover, but I would really love to talk to you about the Fair Work Week ordinance, just radically switching topics here. This is a kind of a personal thing for you too. I mean, I know this is something that you feel very strongly about, and I have a similar kind of background as yours, and it's really important to people who don't earn a lot of money, who are trying to build a family, as your parents and my parents did. Talk to me about that.
Yeah, it is really personal to me. My mom worked a series of low-wage jobs in healthcare organizations, mental institutions, nursing homes, and then at the end of her working life, she was a home health care aide working with the sick and shut-in, and not having a predictable schedule so that she could plan for things related to us, whether or not she needed to supplement child care, and just be able to live a life where you understood what your schedule was really important. And there were times when that didn't happen, and times when she was treated quite poorly. Ended up losing her job a couple times because her family came first. So I know what that feels like as a child of a parent who's struggling in that kind of environment. And I recognize that it's not one size fits all. Hospitals are different than restaurants, different than other kinds of businesses. And so crafting a solution that meets the needs of these different businesses with different schedules is going to be challenging. There's no question about that. But the answer isn't no. The answer is, how do we partner and work together to find some common ground? So I've been watching this from a distance. I'm going to continue to let the parties do their work, but it's something I feel very strongly about.
Again, we're down to like a couple of minutes here. I'm just going to jump around. The Lawyers Committee for Human Rights sued the city of Chicago about the Lincoln Yards TIF, attempting to get the TIF essentially dissolved. You're a lawyer and you're a mayor. At some point, Are you going to choose sides on this? Are you going to defend the city against this, which would mean defending the TIF? Or
Well, the side that I'm always going to be on is on the side of the residents of the city and what's in their best interest. I'm aware of the lawsuit. I haven't personally read the complaint yet. I'm going to leave that to the lawyers at the law department, so I won't comment on existing litigation. But I understand the point, which people felt like this was a process that deviated from the norm. They felt like there wasn't sufficient community involvement, and I agree with that point for sure. But we have to do things a different way, which is transparently involving community. Communities that are affected by mega developments have to have a seat at the table on the front end, not somewhere along the way on the front end. And that's a commitment that I make.
I have to ask you about Miguel del Valle. What was the reason for that choice?
Well, I haven't said that that was my choice.
Oh, you haven't?
I haven't.
Oh, see, I thought that everything I had read
your
indicated that
your friend Fran put that out there, but I haven't made an offer yet to anybody to be president of the school.
Boy, do I stand corrected. I mean, like everybody else, I've just been reading that that's a fait accompli, that he's your choice. Well, okay. Would Miguel del Valle be a good choice?
Look, I think he would be a good choice. I mean, he's somebody obviously who knows a lot about the CPS landscape. He's given a lot of his blood, sweat, and tears to improving the quality of education when he was a state legislator, when he held different positions in state government, and plus he's a really good guy.
Yeah, an old friend of our show too. So you got about 5 or 6 other people to appoint to the board. Can you tell us who they are?
Not yet. We're waiting, and I'm not trying to be coy about this, but because of what's happened previously, CPS has a very extensive and thorough vetting process. We put names forward. We have a whole slate that we put forward, but I don't want to get ahead of that process. So as soon as we get the green light, then we'll make sure that we let those names out publicly.
And we're getting the red light here, so I think we better let you get back to running the city of Chicago and stop talking to reporters.
Well, Ken,
thank you so much.
I just want to say it's been a great pleasure. I think you've done a tremendous service to the city. Your programs, both that I've been on and that I've watched over the years, have always been great and informative. And I hope that this isn't the last chapter for you, that we see you in a different incarnation, because you do great work.
Thank you. I hope so too. And now that I no longer have to try to have any sort of, kind of objectivity about this, I really wish you good luck.
Thank you.
I really do. I voted for you. I will admit that publicly, and I was thrilled that you became mayor. And I really do, like you, I'm getting calls from friends who are saying, I just have this weird feeling of optimism. I know it can't last, but I can't, I'm feeling good about this.
That's good.
So don't let us down.
Thank you.
Good luck to you.
All
Thank
right.
you very much.
Thanks.
Bye. Mayor Lori Lightfoot here on Chicago Newsroom on our final program. And I must say it's a true honor and a privilege to have been invited into Mayor Lightfoot's office to chat with her for half an hour or so. And we're very grateful that she found the time. But we've still got more to talk about here on the program because, there's a million other things going on. And 2 of my favorite people are joining us right now from the Daily Line, A.D. Quigg and Heather Sharon. Welcome back to the table.
Thank you for having us.
So glad to have you here, and for whatever it's worth, the last images to flicker on the TV on our program. So
We will try to do you proud. Yes, it's an honor.
we were just chatting a little bit about how often you appear in Chicago media, the 2 of you, and it's kind of something that I wanted to talk about a little bit today, in addition to all of the news that's going on, but about the media landscape, because we are truly in a really fascinating period in the media landscape where you guys are working for a subscription news service. So it's not a broadly read thing like the Sun-Times or something. You have to actually pay to read your work, and I'm one of those people and proud of it.
Thank you.
But your reach is so much greater than the actual organization that you work for, because you participate in so many other podcasts and broadcasts, and all of us are doing multimedia things. So it's just a really kind of, forgive me for saying this, but it's kind of just a great time to be alive and to be young and coming up in the business. And I'm so happy for you.
I was lucky enough to speak to Carol Marine's journalism class at DePaul University, and she asked me if I had any advice for them. And I said, don't pigeonhole yourself.
Yes.
When I graduated from
Yes.
Northwestern, I thought I would work in newspapers my entire career. It didn't quite work out that way.
Right.
So I think journalists today have to be willing to, get the news to people however they want to get it, whether it's on a podcast or a TV show or a smoke signal or an email blast.
Whatever your device.
You got to do. You got to be able to communicate that way.
Right, and part of it is also we have to convince people that the news we report is worth it. And because we don't take down the paywall so often, we want to demonstrate that we know our stuff.
And I think that's exactly. It's just kind of in sync with where we are right now, and I think it's really kind of beneficial, honestly, to be at a younger, starting up organization than it is to be at an older, huge organization with massive budgets trying to figure their way through. It's just the way of the world.
There's a lot of pluses and there are some minuses.
There are.
If AD wants to write a really in-depth story about property tax assessments, I have the flexibility to say absolutely go for it, right until your heart's content.
Right.
The flip side of that is that when it's a major breaking news story, and it would help to have 4 people or 6 people, we've got to be sort of in multiple places at once. So I'm pleased to announce I am working on cloning both AD and myself.
Oh, good. So there'll be 4 of you.
Yes.
Oh, that's terrific. That's another thing that, again, old man's privilege here, but I remember a while back when Charlie Meyerson, who's also in the same business you are and doing it, where?
Rivet.
Oh, yeah, that's right. Of course, you worked at Rivet Radio.
I came to Chicago.
Oh, yeah, that's right. Well, anyway, many years before that, he was working for the Tribune, and he was the first, I guess you'd almost call it like digital editor or something. He created a daily news digest at the Chicago Tribune. And, that was going very well. And one day, I was just looking at it, and I thought, oh my God, they've made this horrible mistake. He linked to, I think it was a Mary Mitchell column in the Sun-Times. And I'm looking at this, and I'm going like, oh my God, can you believe what a massive screw-up this is? The Tribune just... Well, that was the first of what we now think of as completely normal. It's like someone does something that's worthwhile, and we do it. We all build on it. And I just think that's really cool. So, what's the early line on the Lightfoot administration? We just talked with her, and she told me very sincerely, and I believe her, that she honestly believes that there's a kind of an optimism among people that she meets that maybe things are going to truly be different with her. Does she have any chance of not making a difference, but convincing people that things really are different?
Well, I think yesterday was an interesting glimpse into what a Lightfoot administration could look like. If we travel back in time to 2011, famously Rahm Emanuel took office after cutting a deal with Ed Burke to keep him as Finance Committee chair, that he could keep his security detail, that he could keep all of the trappings of power that he's accumulated over the last half century. And that set the tone for Emanuel sort of working hand in glove with the city council. That was not what happened Wednesday at City Hall. Mayor Lightfoot told Ed Burke in only slightly more polite terms to sit down and shut up, and that if she was interested in hearing from him, she would call on him. And as I wrote this morning, it was just a sea change, because for decades he dictated the pace of the city council meetings. If he wanted to give a lecture on the Great Chicago Fire, he would do that, and no one would.
And as you pointed out this morning, all the other aldermen would just sit, including the mayor. Everyone would wait until he was finished.
Absolutely. And now he's literally pushed to the side. He's on the very far right of the city council chambers. We're all sort of holding our breath to see if he's going to be indicted by next Friday or if he will be hit with more charges. So it was in Lori Lightfoot's, honestly, her best interest to demonstrate her power. But that's a very different path than Rahm Emanuel chose. So I think that is perhaps where that optimism for change has some relevance
but
there.
It was still strong like Rahm. Like,
yes.
I am running the city council, and this is my rostrum, and we're going at my pace now. So kind of that show of force a couple people were like, that was pretty Rami.
Yeah,
That was a pretty Rami
well,
style.
I mean, let's face it. The other side of this thing is that Ed Burke has had his legs cut off pretty
Right.
much by the federal government. So if he were still the same Ed Burke of 8 years ago, Lori Lightfoot probably wouldn't have said that to him, I would guess.
She wouldn't be mayor.
Yeah,
You're right.
well, that's
Exactly.
true.
I mean,
Exactly.
her campaign was, I had heard her referred to as a junior varsity mayoral candidate by several people.
Yeah.
And her campaign caught fire when he was indicted, and she successfully tarred Tony Prackwinkle, Bill Daley, and Gary Chico as being too close to Burke. So it's he may have gotten reelected, but he did nobody else any favors.
So the reorganization that happened yesterday, you and lots of people have been writing about it. It is pretty stunning to think that well, as I mentioned to her just a few minutes ago, we started out with this press kind of competition to see who could name the next finance committee chairman. Does someone have 25 votes? Oh, does Wagasback now have 26 votes, and all that kind of stuff. But the narrative was very clearly, this is going to be a tough slog to get her organization the way she wants it. How did we get from that about 10 days ago to a voice vote with a couple of people meekly saying no, and everybody else just voting yes?
Well, I remember part of my caution at the beginning of this was aldermen are not great at organizing themselves. So we spoke a lot about how this new city council might build coalitions to challenge the mayor. We just didn't see that coalition form. And the best positioned person, the person with the most parliamentary knowledge, the most history, the most money to toss around, used to be Ed Burke. And it's not Ed Burke anymore. So we didn't see Anthony Beale, for example, who came out against this aldermanic prerogative, or Raymond Lopez, actively trying to organize aldermen against it.
Yeah.
And in that vacuum, here comes Lori Lightfoot, her new floor leader, Gil Villegas, and a sentiment that maybe Scott Wagasback is the right kind of reform person to run the finance committee. And once you get over that hurdle, everything else kind of falls into place.
Yeah.
And she was also very strategic with the kind of old establishment Democrat folks, keeping them in certain places. So we have Michelle Harris still at Rules, we have Emma Mitt still at License, and we had kind of vice chairmanships sprinkled throughout, and a reshuffling of budgets as well, so that no one's feelings are too hurt.
Yeah, I mean, the Finance Committee is a shell of what it once was. It no longer has the workers' compensation program, and its personnel budget is roughly 2/3 lower than what it was under Ed Burke. So that's going to mean that Scott Wagasback doesn't have sort of those, staff members he could lend
Doesn't
out.
have 25 people to hire.
Right.
Or a
he-
security detail.
Right, or a
right.
security detail. But what's interesting is that
Can I just pause you for just a second there? I was fascinated this morning to see what I was not aware of was how much she's cut all the other committees too. I mean, pretty much every committee got cut by a third or a half in the amount of money they have. And
That's right.
They all used to complain about not having enough people, so.
Yeah, transportation got cut. The former committee headed by Anthony Beale, and also the workforce development committee got cut. And now that one was run by Alderman Pat O'Connor, who was Rahm Emanuel's floor leader. So I think that was clearly an area where the mayor thought that there was bloat. What's interesting is that new committee will be chaired by Susan Sedlowski Garza, who could not be more different in her approach to labor and workforce than Pat O'Connor. She, of course, is the first member of the Chicago Teachers Union to be elected to the city council, and of course her dad was Ed Oilkin Sedlowski, a labor icon from the southeast side. So, Mayor Lightfoot mentioned only a couple legislative priorities in her post-city council press conference. One of those was the Fair Work Week scheduling ordinance, which would require workers to get more notice of their schedules. So she's already sort of leaned into a very progressive priority, which we were talking amongst ourselves is perhaps not what we would have expected from the opening days of a Lightfoot administration.
Yeah. When she was speaking with us about the police department, we were talking about some other things, but the essence of it is where she said, well, yes, they will do what I tell them. I'm the boss. I'm their boss. And it's like, okay. I have no doubt. I have no doubt that you are. But it's, I don't think even Rahm Emanuel ever made a statement like that about, I'm the boss, they'll do what I tell them.
Well, he didn't even attempt to negotiate a new contract with the FOP, which is expired, it expired 3 years ago at the end of next month.
Right.
And that's a huge challenge facing Mayor Lightfoot, because AD and I have often said we don't understand a deal that could pass the city council with the mayor's support that would also be ratified by the membership. Like, there's just that, if you picture a Venn diagram, it's basically like
no
that.
center.
You just have two circles. So that's going to be a big challenge.
Not only negotiating the content of the contract itself, but how are we going to pay for all of this? 3 years of back pay. How are we going to pay for the cops that she wants to add? How are we going to pay for all the other violence reduction programs that she wants to fund through other city departments? It's a massive lift, and she hasn't yet identified how big the hole is. So at first we thought maybe 550, now we're hearing 750. Now it's more than 750, plus all the reforms she wants to do on ticketing and booting, which will cost the city money, and then all these additional programs and affordable housing goals, and it's a
There
lot.
was some magnificent reporting done on that by ProPublica and then later by BEZ about, this. I mean, we've done so many discussions about it on the program here, but you start out with for whatever reason, you don't buy your city sticker. The ticket is $200. The fine is $400. The boot comes next. After the boot comes the confiscation of your car. If you don't pay by that time $1,000 or more dollars, they'll just scrap your car, or worse, they'll crush it and send you a bill for $100 for crushing it. And the next step down the road is bankruptcy, and so many Chicagoans went that way. And I think she's really making hay with trying to see to draw attention to that and make that something that the city can change.
Well, she's spoken explicitly at City Club in a surprisingly forceful way, because we know the typical City Club crowd is kind of the city's rich elite, about what the mayor's office can do to try to reverse decades and decades of institutional structural racism in the city of Chicago. Another huge ask, but ticketing reform is a big part of that.
It is, because that's how it starts.
Yeah.
Who gets the tickets and how is it
Who
decided?
gets stuck in the cycle of poverty and who benefits. So she basically pointed to the City Club crowd and said, folks like you are the reason that Black people and people of color in Chicago have been suffering for as long as they have, and we're going to try to turn that around.
And she got 3 standing ovations from that crowd at the City Club. That was pretty astounding to me too, because that's not the crowd that would usually stand up to applaud for people talking about bringing fiscal equity to the city or whatever. So let's talk about the CTU. Can she get over the fact that the CTU didn't endorse her?
So in her mind, I think, and I'm, playing amateur psychologist here a little bit, is that she believes, I think, she had a significant base of support among the rank and file teachers. So I think that she believes that she had a greater support rather than the full-throated endorsement of the leadership would reflect for Toni Preckwinkle. The CTU endorsed Preckwinkle very, very early. There was even some talk that CTU should have endorsed Amara Anaya because she was more progressive. So it will be interesting to see how that plays out. The clock is ticking on an elected school board bill in Springfield. That is going to frustrate CTU if it's blocked again for the 3rd year, this time by the new mayor after being blocked by Rahm Emanuel. But there's a lot of a Venn diagram that's just 2 circles of what's possible and what the teachers want and will demand. But I don't think Lori sees the teachers as separate from her base. I think the leadership,
good point,
she separates from the rank and the file.
And there's so much of what she campaigned on that is what they want in these contract negotiations. They agree on more wraparound services for kids. They want a charter school freeze. I think the big hump to get over is going to be the composition of this elected school board. And she can signal a lot by who she appoints to the school board in the interim, the current school board, which stepped down, I think, last week in its entirety. So she'll be announcing replacements to those folks. I think she can kind of signal her priorities to CTU by those appointments.
But the thing about that, though, is that I think she's making what I consider to be an eloquent point about the inadequacy of this proposal for an elected school board when you're talking about 22 or 25 or whatever it is people. You're just going to create another nightmare. I don't see it as being a solution, honestly. I really don't.
Well, it's difficult to create a new political entity because to get it through, you've got to sort of give everybody a little bit of something.
Right.
And the question is, how do you draw the districts? Who's eligible to run? And how do you give everybody a little piece of something so they're all inclined to vote for it? And, we've talked a little bit about Rahm Emanuel's legacy. This is really Richard M. Daley's legacy.
Yes, it is. Yeah.
Because he sort of gave, he seized control of the schools, in 1995. And, this is sort of figuring out how do we undo that after so many years.
Yeah. And the local school councils were becoming more and more powerful until Daley came in and decided that he needed to clip their wings. But this democracy thing gets really nasty. It gets really ugly. And when you're now laying on top of that another layer of the elected police board, and this is something I just find fascinating, that both the CPAC and the GAPA, these are two proposals that came from the community that Rahm Emanuel never allowed to go before the city council. And now I'm reading, I don't know if I read it in your place or what, but isn't Carlos Rosa going to be?
He reintroduced CPAC at city council this month with more co-sponsors than he had last time, but not that 26 that you need. And Alderman Harry Osterman, who was the sponsor of the GAPA ordinance last term, said over the next couple weeks we're going to be renegotiating GAPA again and kind of fine-tuning it to reintroduce it on June 12th. And he is the new vice chair of public safety, and he kind of said, we're going to have hearings on them both, and we'll go from there. But they're vastly different proposals.
They are.
I mean, CPAC would completely abolish most of the police oversight agencies we have now, have the ability to hire and fire the superintendent. They would be doing misconduct investigations. There would be elected officials from all 22 police districts who would have what sounds like a vast amount of investigatory power. Whereas GAPA, in this amended version, gives a lot more power to the mayor, and this is more of an advisory role for this board. They could put together the short list for who the superintendent would be, put together a short list for who would run the Civilian Office of Police Accountability. So they're really different proposals, but I think this will be one of the first tests for the new Socialist Caucus and some of these new progressive members that got elected this term.
When we had Carlos Ramirez Rosa on the show a few weeks ago, he described the GAPA proposal as being more like Obamacare. It's just kind of like you're trying to patch together a whole bunch of existing things and try to make something work out of it, whereas we're going for a completely new approach. But somewhere in there's going to have to be some compromising. Somebody's going to have to come up with something, especially if wouldn't that be interesting if the council just locks and can't decide on it? That's unlikely, I suppose.
Well, Lori Lightfoot has said she favors the GAPA proposal, and I think that if she's willing to sort of, put her shoulder into it and say, hey, Emma Metz, are you enjoying continuing being committee chair? I'm sure in favor of this.
And Emma Metz is a CPAC sponsor at the moment.
Right, because...
Is she really?
Yeah.
Oh.
Yeah.
From the start. That will be an interesting one, and I don't know how much Lightfoot can go to the consent decree monitor and say, hey, do you guys want to let us know what you think about both of these proposals? And then they can just, in the same way I think they might with a lot of the FOP contract provisions, just point to the consent decree and be like, sorry, it's federal, we got to stick to that.
Yeah. Wow. So Emma Metz was in favor of that, even though the Cop Academy is in her ward and all that. So
she hasn't spoken at length about her justification, but I think a few people signed on, I know, last term just because they wanted fulsome hearings on whatever their replacement would be.
Yeah. What happens? And speaking of that, about the Chicago Police Training Academy? I mean, I think that's pretty much a cooked deal now, right? I mean, everything passed that needed to pass the city council, so they can probably start construction anytime soon, as far as I'm guessing. But does Lori Lightfoot, who vociferously opposed it, does she have the ability to modify it in any way, or to rethink it, or is it just too late?
Well, I think that's a big question. I don't know that she wants to, because she could certainly say, it's done. I couldn't, I can't do anything about it. It's out of my control. It was done in the last administration. Or she could attempt to slow at least the permitting process and sort of go to, AECom, which got the contract, to say, look, I'd like to renegotiate some things. It's in your best interest to renegotiate those things. I also think that's going to be interesting to see if that happens with the Lincoln Yards and the 78 developments. Lori Lightfoot sort of said, please stop. Okay, now you can go. I'm not real thrilled about it. Right. What actions does she take to attempt to modify those, sort of last minute actions by Rahm Emanuel? I don't know the answer to that question.
Well, we had the people on the show who filed the lawsuit, and the whole thing about that is that it would essentially nullify the TIF supplemental pay, whatever you want to call it, for that, or $1.3 billion or something dollars. So the thing that's interesting about this is that she's now the mayor. So the city would have to defend itself against that lawsuit, which would put the mayor in the position of spending city money to defend something that she didn't believe in from the beginning. So where does that leave everything? I mean, that gets really complicated.
I imagine that her new corporation counsel, Mark Flessner, who was nominated officially this week, those will be questions that he will be asked by aldermen as he goes through confirmation hearings. And, that's, again, another instance of just really uncharted territory. We've never had sort of a mayor take over from another mayor and campaigning on undoing what he has done, and that's really what we have here. I mean, even Rahm Emanuel took office saying, I'm here to clean things up, but he never said, I'm here to undo what Richard Daley did. I mean, they were allies.
Well, it wasn't Richard Daley, it was just that former guy.
Right, because he never mentioned
We dare not speak his name.
Right.
But yeah, I'm interested in how the Lincoln Yards and every major TIF development kind of fits into a broader talk about, is she going to attempt to reform TIF? Which she spoke about, we need more transparency, we need a full accounting of what all these different TIF districts are trying to do and what they've accomplished and how much money this might be taking away from the city's general coffers. That would just be a massive undertaking and something that I know would tick off a lot of aldermen who are already abuzz about aldermanic prerogative. There are people who are like, don't touch my TIF. Walter Burnett is one of those folks who's like, don't you dare speak out against this project in my ward because I've been working for sometimes years to bring, this annex to this school or this new park facility or fixing up this street or whatever. So it might be another chapter in taking on aldermanic prerogative that I don't know when or how she'll launch it.
So is Lori Lightfoot an incrementalist? Will she actually be able to negotiate around the edges and sort of move things forward a little bit here, a little bit there, or is she going to want to just tear it down and re-begin?
Well, so I think what she did with aldermanic prerogative could be at least part of an answer for that, because she could have come into office and immediately launched a rewrite of the zoning code, because that's where the heart of aldermanic power really rests. And she hasn't done that. Instead, she's sort of said administratively, we're going to pull back on your ability to, green light or veto permits and licenses and that sort of thing. So that certainly is working around the edges of where the heart of the problem is. So if you want to make the argument that she's taking an incremental approach to aldermanic prerogative, you could do so. However, it's difficult when she basically turns and claps at the alderman and says, look, the reform is coming, so get ready.
Get on the train, everybody.
Yeah. So, but, I often think about President Obama's metaphor of the federal government as the Titanic. You can't turn it on a dime. You can only sort of set a course in a different direction. And I suppose I should ask her if she agrees with that. But I imagine that she agrees with that. It seems to fit her record as a trial attorney and somebody who's used to working within the system as opposed to trying to blow it up from the outside.
But it's just a really fascinating thing to be someone coming in with that level of mandate and the kind of power that she seems to have, and the things that she could do very quickly, but then she might pay a huge price if she did them. So I have no idea. I don't know how you go about this. As you said, it's all uncharted territory, you know?
Indeed.
So let's talk a little bit about the state, shall we? I mean, there's just, you know, here we are sitting here talking about all this stuff, and meanwhile you got J.B. Pritzker out there running at about 98 miles an hour, and we're seeing more change in Illinois than we've seen in probably my lifetime. I just can't believe what's going on. What's your take on all of that?
Well, we're taping this Thursday mid-morning.
Right.
Who knows what will happen in the
So
next
this will
hour.
probably all be outdated by midnight Friday, the deadline for the General Assembly to act.
That's
but
right.
as of this point, medical marijuana is no longer the law of the land. They're moving toward legalization for adults, so that's a huge change.
Yeah.
Our Springfield reporter, Hannah Meisel, reported this morning there's a deal on sports betting, which could include a casino for Chicago.
And that just happened this morning, right?
Correct.
Just back, as we said, it's noon on Thursday. It just happened.
Right.
Yeah.
So there are lots of other big issues out there. Will Illinois buck the trend of southern states and expand abortion rights and access? Oh yeah, and there's a budget.
Yeah, there's an entire budget.
Oh,
We don't know
and
what's-
potentially a $42 billion capital plan.
Yeah.
Not to mention all the little stuff that we don't notice until
Right.
the session is over. And I've just been covering Fritz Kagi is our county assessors down there trying to get a data modernization bill so he can get his hands on a little bit more data ahead of the South Suburban Triennial Assessment. And just following that has been like up, down, back and forth. And some stuff Preckwinkle cares about. She cares about expungement in the marijuana process. She cares about a capital bill. It's so much going on all at once.
And Lori Lightfoot has said the state needs to step in and help the city deal with its pension, with pension problem, either by pushing off the deadline for the city to start making more payments, or to basically give the city the money to make those payments.
But it actually does appear that both the House and the Senate have come to the acknowledgement that the Democrats won a massive majority and they have the ability to do these things, so they're just going to go and do them. And it's a big change. Where's Mike Madigan these days? I don't hear from him that much anymore.
He likes it that way.
Yes.
This is back to his MO.
He's listening to this and saying, I have done my job well
Right.
this session.
Quickly on that other stuff too, there's this thing about expanding the restaurant tax and all the changes at what we always used to call McPier. They're talking about tearing down the Mistake by the Lake, the original McCormick place, or at least leveling it down to the ground. Sounds like what we were talking about with what's his name, the big celebrity who was going to have his museum there.
George Lucas.
Yeah, George
Yeah.
Lucas. Same kind of thing, just like level it to the ground. But that takes a lot of money because they're going to have to build another building somewhere.
And they would do it by essentially making everybody going out to eat on the north side of Chicago pay an additional 1% tax on their bill. So at least even for me, who covers this pretty closely, it came out of, I think, left field for a lot of people. It certainly wasn't on the list of sort of pressing issues that the state needed to solve in this, very, very limited time frame.
Yeah.
So we'll see if it happens.
Yes, we will, and again, it's just a reminder that that's yet another taxing body out there. The whatever it's now called, the McPier Authority, they can tax us to support McCormick Place and Navy Pier. So, anyway, I think we've covered much of this, and I got to let you go because you guys are the hardest working people in journalism, and I got to get you back to the office and get your podcast recorded and everything else. So, thanks so much for everything. I really enjoyed having you on this show, and I mentioned earlier when I was talking to Rob Feeder that one of the real thrills for me has been. As I come sort of like to pretty much the end of my professional career, seeing younger people coming along and just having the chance to meet them and to say, go for it.
Oh, your support means everything to a whole generation of Chicago journalists.
Absolutely.
So that's a feather in your cap.
Yeah, well, that's really all I wanted, so that's great. But yes, I do wish you all the luck in the world, and I know you're not going to need my wish. You're going to be fine without it, but congratulations to you both.
Thank you. We'll miss you.
Heather Sharon and A.D. Quigg from the Daily Line. And what we're going to do now is we're going to just switch seats here. We're not going to bother with all this formal stuff. Hey, the show's over, you know. Thank you, ladies. Thanks for being here. Dave Resnick has been the producer of our show for a couple of years now, and we've talked to him from time to time on the show, and so we just figured we'd bring old Dave in here for the last couple of minutes. Old Dave. So we talked just briefly with them a little bit about media and the generational shifts in media. We first met back in the 80s, I guess it was, or 90s or something.
32 years.
At WBEZ.
We both had hair.
Yeah. And in fact, right after this, we're going to hear from John Dempsey, who also was part of that. So we're taking one last trip down memory lane.
32 years ago. These didn't exist.
Yeah, that's for sure.
The news that we consumed, we had to consume from some other source.
Dead trees, mostly.
Dead trees and old journalists like us. And that's kind of where I know you spoke to the ladies about shifts. I mean, if you look at how most people get their news, and not just people of a certain age, but people, all people along the spectrum, especially skewing younger, it's from this. And it's from this with the late lamented DNA Info, now the predecessor or the follower Block Club and Chalkbeat and the Daily Line and Public Square, One Illinois, City Bureau, ProPublica, BGA, everybody's in the game, but...
That's a good list, by the way, yes.
But the interesting thing is who isn't in the game. And when you look at the broadcast stations in town, the television stations, there are no more beats. I mean, they have political editors, but you know, when you and I started together, there was an education reporter at all the owned and operated. There was a financial reporter at all the owned and operated. There was a health reporter at all the owned and operated. Those people are gone.
Yeah.
And so what you have in television newsrooms, and to some extent in radio newsrooms, are generalists. I mean, WBEZ has broken that mold a bit by spending a ton of money and becoming the premier news shop in town. But it's taken the wind out of a lot of other people's sails because it's so hard to break news. If you don't have people on the street and you don't have dedicated beats and
you don't have beat reporters
and you don't have any way to funnel the information up, then you're basically doing a rip and read of the newspaper.
Yeah. And a lot of that is happening. I mean, a great deal of what we see every day is the retransmission of other people's news. I mean, we see that almost constantly. A big story will happen somewhere, and within 2 hours, it's retransmitted by these other media. And I guess that's a good thing because that's how people are seeing stuff now.
Well, it's a good thing and a bad thing. It's a good thing because, you know, if somebody shouts and you hear it wrong, are you sure you got it right?
Yeah.
And so the idea of enterprise journalism is, you know, I won't say it's dying, but it's certainly, aside from the narrow casting that we talked about a minute ago, it really doesn't exist.
But you know, I really have such mixed feelings about this because just a mini example from just recently, Dave Glowacz, who is a great writer and journalist in Chicago, who hasn't had a great deal of exposure. Has started doing some pieces for the Reader, and he did a great piece on David Riefman and how David Riefman has left the room, and connecting him to all of the things that he was involved with before he became Rahm Emanuel's planning director. And that got some bump, and people were reading it. And I was thinking, you know, this is the difference, is that what you were talking about before, with everybody having their own reporters, you could count all of those people. There were 80 or 90 of them in the whole city. And nobody else could write a story and get it out into the public. The media didn't exist for that. So it is more level, it is more flat now. And that's probably a good thing. But I agree with you that there's something lost. There's definitely something lost.
I mean, the genesis of our relationship was in the Harold Washington administration. 1987, I started at WBEZ. You were my boss, and we would trundle down to the hall, and we would, try and stake out our positions and find the aldermen or public officials who were making news. But it was very difficult to disseminate that information unless, as you suggest, you had a printing press or a transmitter.
Right, right.
And as you say, now everybody has a printing press and a transmitter.
Yeah.
And so the democratization of that is good in one sense, but as I was saying, it's sometimes hard to know unless you know the bona fides of the source.
Yes.
Is it being spun? And I think that's why One Illinois, which is Amaya Pawar's endeavor, is an important one to mention, because they are trying to get a more unfiltered view of things. I don't know. I mean, very few people have heard of One Illinois. I'm hoping that it grows to be something that fills in those holes. But I guess I kind of wanted to forgive the indulgence. I wanted to thank you. I know this is going to be maudlin for some, but not for me. It was a chance meeting at a restaurant a couple of years ago.
Dengio's in Skokie.
Where I...
And that's not a plug, that's
No,
just a
it's
statement of fact.
Where I was there with my daughter,
Yeah.
who I introduced to Ken, and we started chatting, and I was out of the business for a while, and
Yeah.
I said, "Say, you want some help?"
And I started whining about how, it's so hard to book this show every week. Yeah.
And he said, "Well, I'm afraid of you, but..."
Yeah.
So from that fear,
Yeah.
hopefully, grew
Yeah.
something of import and merit.
Yeah.
It's been,
It's been wonderful.
in my view, a pleasure. I've gotten to know you as a grown-up.
Yeah,
And it's been wonderful. And I think that what you said to the women who were just here, I think is echoed by a lot of folks. And that is, we tried to, what? What? We tried to give voice
No, that's true.
to the people who are behind the scenes, who you don't see all the time, who are writing and reporting and trying to get to the meat and potatoes. And I think that's hopefully someone or some organization will grow up to fill what I think for listeners and viewers will be a void. And I think that the unfiltered, if you will, and somewhat unvarnished, I'll argue, approach that we took put people at ease. I mean, we were able to get people to experience this as sort of their own little coffee clutch. And I think that that's important, because there really aren't a lot of other products like this out there.
Yeah. Well, that is true, and that's the one thing that I'll toot the horn a little bit, is that we've had many guests, ranging from Forrest Claypool to Lori Lightfoot, who have said that it was a pleasure for them to come here and be able to just explain themselves without everything having to be reduced to a sound bite. That's one of the things that really annoys me, is that even the reporter panel shows, it's like you get like 15 seconds to respond to the question. We could do more.
And the imperative in those cases is to make news, and our imperative
is not.
It's just not. We were the
to understand
anti-make
it.
news show.
We got to go, Dave. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Ken.
Talk to you later.
Pleasure.
We recorded this last week, and we want to play it for you now. Talk about your trip down Nostalgia Row. John M. Dempsey has been working at WLS Radio for, I don't even know how. He's done like 5 morning shows, and we first met him at WBEZ when we hired him on as a newscaster over there, and a great reporter he turned out to be. Let's watch John Dempsey here on Chicago Newsroom. It's Chicago Newsroom here on CAN TV, and as you know, we're having a kind of a casting call here, where we're calling people who've been on the show in the past and who've been friends of the show for just one last chance in front of the cameras. And I'm so happy that John Dempsey is joining us right now.
Hi, Ken.
One of the great voices of the Big 89.
Hi, Ken. How are you?
I'm fine.
I can't believe this is coming to an end.
Oh,
Chicago Newsroom?
yeah, we don't need to be morose about it. Yeah, it's time. 3 months away from 10 years. So
10
about
years.
450 shows or something like that. That's
And
enough.
I've been on a few shows.
You have. You certainly have.
Thank you for inviting me. Thank you for inviting me here today.
Uh-huh.
I could gush about you
No,
for our
don't.
entire
No,
18-minute
no.
segment here.
No,
today.
that would be wrong.
Would that be bad TV?
It would just be
Would
wrong.
that
yeah.
prompt people to grab the
Yeah,
clicker?
yeah. Yeah, that's right. So, I mean, we should say that we've known each other for a very long time.
Yeah, we met in '85, which
Yeah.
was when I started at WBEZ.
Yeah.
And you were the program director
Yes,
at the
I was.
time.
Yes, I was.
And Diane Duvall was the news director.
Yes,
and
she
you
was.
guys both hired me. I had been working at WJOL radio in Joliet. And I was young, which I'm not now, but
So anyway, yeah.
but yeah, and you remember those days at now WBEZ is a colossus. Isn't it amazing?
It just absolutely
Did you ever
blows my mind.
Did you ever imagine that it would be what it is now? They've got TV commercials.
I
They've
know.
got radio commercials
They've got TV
advertising on our
right.
station.
Right. Are they advertising on
on
OS?
WLS FM
Are they
has
really?
commercials in the morning for WBEZ.
Of course, as has been pointed out, the sun is in the wrong position in those commercials. You know that, right?
yes.
It says it's like supposed to be 5:43 in the morning, and the sun is setting
Over
over
in the
the
west,
west, and all the traffic is going.
But anyway,
north.
yeah, we were the station at back then was in the Bankers Building
Yes.
at Clark and Adams.
Yeah.
And you had to take the elevator to the 39th floor, then you had to walk to the 40th floor, then you had to walk up to the 41st floor to the ant-infested newsroom, which you built with your carpentry skills.
Well, yeah, we had to have some tables and stuff, so we just spent a weekend over there, a bunch of people, and we just brought in tools and just built it.
And I know you don't want to turn this into me interviewing you, but how did BEZ grow? We know how it has grown in the 90s and in the 2000s, but in the days from the time you arrived in the late 70s, it was over at the Board of Ed headquarters.
Yeah, it was,
correct.
yeah.
And
They
then
had
how
a
did
couple
you end
studios
up at
over
the
there.
Bankers Building, and how did?
Well, I mean,
those-
since I'm not going to be around that much longer to talk about this, I think it's a fitting time to say that it was the vision of Carol Nolan. Carol Nolan was a middle-aged woman who was a bureaucrat. I don't even remember honestly where she was in the Board
Was
of
she a
Education.
principal or a teacher?
I don't think she was ever a teacher. But anyway, she somehow or other was tapped when some woman named Elizabeth Marshall, who had been running the Bureau of Broadcasting or something, left, and they asked
the
her...
Chicago Public Schools.
With Chicago Public Schools. BEZ was put on the air as an FM station in 1945 or something because of a polio epidemic, and the kids had to close the schools, so they had a radio station that they could listen to.
for their classes.
Yeah, and then after that, it just kind of fell into this it was on the air from like 9 o'clock to 3 o'clock every day, and I remember very well hanging out with some friends of mine, including Carolyn Grisco, who's now, she's working on the transition team
Right.
and all that. And we spent a few weekends together just sitting around talking about how this station has this dramatically great signal, and it's not being used, and it's
Right.
owned by the Board of Education, and this thing called National Public Radio has just erupted, and there's this show called All Things Considered. They're not even running the whole thing, and it's crazy. We got to get in there. We got to try to see if we can do something with this station. And anyway, it's a long, uninteresting story, but yes, I was able to become news director for $3.50 an hour as a Board of Education. That was gig economy circa
Right,
1979,
right.
right? And then eventually I became the program director and had a 10-year run. And the station grew a lot in that 10 years.
It did.
And we were very proud of what we did. But we had no facilities. We had nothing, as you say, an ant-infested room on top of an elevator. And all of us would sit around and just dream about the day that maybe one day we'll have enough power, we'll have enough collective juice that we could get some money in here and really have a nice thing. And it happened. It happened after my watch. I left in 92, 93. By then it was
92.
By then it was already an independent station, and it was doing fairly
It had broken
well.
away from the Board of Ed
Yeah,
and formed
yes.
something called the WBEZ Alliance,
yeah.
which ran it.
And what happened was some unbelievably smart financial people started looking at it and thinking it was a good financial model, which it was. And who could have predicted in 1990 that by 2020 about the only model left that really works is having your audience pay for the product, right? And that's where we're all at now.
Right. And
So-
with the internet, certainly
Yeah.
BEZ is at the forefront of print. I dare say print journalism, but
yeah.
they've got newspaper people over there, Dan
right.
Mihalopoulos
Yeah,
and others,
Well, you know,
who are breaking stories left and right on the internet.
one of the things that I think public radio has to be proudest of is that NPR saw the whole digital revolution coming years before anybody else, and they started moving into internet before anybody else was even thinking about it, and they were dragging the stations along with them.
Right.
And it has all paid off. It's all paid off in a huge way. I mean, Morning Edition is now the most listened to national program, and you know, it's eclipsed. I think it's even eclipsed your guy Rush Limbaugh over on your station. So yeah.
That's really something. That's really something.
It's something.
But I arrived in '85, and I arrived right in the middle of Council Wars,
Yes,
which was
yes,
an
you did.
unforgettable
Yeah,
time.
yeah,
And I remember in '87, November of '87, I think it was the day before Thanksgiving, that Harold Washington died. And,
yes.
and we went wall to wall with our coverage, and it was some of the proudest
I
moments
think
I've
so,
ever had.
and I still feel that way. And I remember anchoring the all-night thing when Dick Mell was up, on
jumped
the,
up on
desk
the
and
desk.
all that. And I think that our coverage was as good as anybody's,
Yeah.
and it was all being done by a bunch of, you know, kind of minimum wage people
Right,
who were
right.
not that far out of college and just really just
Right.
crazy for radio.
We were all there that night.
Yeah.
David Resnick was there that night.
Yes,
I remember
yeah,
there's
who's now our producer
a
here.
picture of David in the Chicago Reader. The caption said "Alder people on the loose," or so, I can't remember what the caption said, but just I've got so many memories of knowing you and working with you, and you know. The BEZ experience was just unbelievable. for
So
me.
now you're at WLS, and you've been there for a long time.
12 years.
12 years you've been there. So you've been through, I mean, Don and Roma.
I'm on my
you know,
5th morning show.
Unbelievable.
Don and Roma, Bruce and Dan, John Howell, John and Ray, and now I'm working with Mancow.
Mancow. It's just an amazing run, and I'm, you know, I mean, that's a whole story in itself, and we'll spare you that, but you know, WLS is not what WLS used to be, and I think that this is kind of like the other side of this story, when, and I'll just say this, and you don't have to say a word, but when these old line beautiful radio stations all started getting snapped up by conglomerates and corporate interests, and they just became another widget for them, they didn't really care that much about how many people they had. Well, they cared. They knew they wanted to cut them as much as they could. And you're ending up with these kind of, I'll say, hollowed out stations like WLS, which is really sad. We were talking at another time on the show with Phil Rogers, and he and I met at WLS in 1975 or something.
Weren't you a teenage DJ, or did you want a contest to be a teenage DJ on
1964. 63, yeah,
And so
May
what did
9th,
you-
1964.
were you doing news in the 70s there?
No. We're telling a story again for the second time, but in those days when I was there, I started there in like 74 to like 78 or something. WLS was so powerful. Fred Winston in the
Yes,
morning,
Larry
Larry
Lujak,
Lujak,
yeah.
everybody.
Bob Surratt.
That in
Ryan
those days,
Decker.
the FCC required stations like WLS to do public service programming, and they had to do 5 hours of it. So in the spirit of public service, they put it from midnight to 5 on Sunday night and Monday morning. And I had the honor of being the producer of that mess.
Okay.
And we had 4 rotating hosts, because this was the days when you had to sort of, I don't say this in a deprecating way, but you know, you had to have representation
Balance,
of
yeah.
different genders
groups and genders, right.
and races, and LS didn't have any of that, so they put it all on from midnight to 5,
Right.
and I produced it. And I was just saying that it's like, I would call somebody and say, we would like you to come on to our show to talk about abortion, because that's all we ever talked about was abortion. And they say, sure, I'll be there, and what time you want me there? 3:45 in the morning. Oh, sure, and then they would come with their jars of fetuses
Right.
and stuff, and it was crazy times.
Oh, gosh.
But, you know, LS doesn't have that kind of power anymore, and really no one does. No one has that kind of domineering power that the big old AMs used to have.
Well, yeah, and what you're saying certainly has happened in the broadcasting industry, in the radio industry, and there have been so many changes, obviously, in the industry. But I think one of the biggest changes, and I know I'm dating myself when I say this, is the advent of the TV morning shows.
Yeah.
Because
yeah.
when I was growing up, we had a radio in pretty much every room of the house.
absolutely, yeah.
We sure as heck had a radio in the kitchen.
Yeah.
And now most kitchens have a little TV set, and they're watching the Today Show, or they're watching the local news morning shows on TV. And all those people used to be listening to the radio in the morning. And then people started moving out further and further out into the exurbs of Chicago. So they had to get up earlier and earlier to go to work. And they would, and so these TV stations began starting their shows at 6, and then at 5:30, and then at 5, and now they're starting at 4 in the morning.
But that's what saved radio was
The
long
long commute in
right?
a car.
Yes,
and I think, I don't have statistics to back this up, but obviously, I would venture to say most radio listening is done in the car now. You know, and so it has changed, and there's much more niche programming. Like in the days of you producing your show at WLS, you probably always would strive for both sides. And when the fairness doctrine was done away with, stations used to.
We don't have to do this anymore.
Yeah, stations used to have to provide both sides, and you know, everybody knows that my station is a conservative. WLS is now a conservative station, because the owners of the company have determined that's our niche market, and we're going for that. And everything in broadcasting now is about a niche and appealing to that niche and staying in your lane, and so that's just kind of the way that it is right now.
So we have only a few minutes here, but you want to talk a little bit about Chicago politics?
Well, I want
to quote Bill Cameron back to you. Bill Cameron, one of the other greats of Chicago journalism, radio, he works for your station. He said, "You may not have always agreed with him, but Rahm Emanuel got more done than any of the other 7 Chicago mayors I've covered."
I saw that tweet from Bill, and I was a little bit surprised, because Bill goes back to Richard J. Daley.
Yeah.
But, and I know it's easy to criticize Rahm Emanuel, but he came in and I really feel that he did tackle the financial problems of the city head on. He didn't want to sweep them under the rug, and obviously he raised a lot of taxes, but something has to be done, and had to be done, and has to be done going forward to really get at the root of these financial problems. Now, a lot of people would say that Richard M. Daley financially mismanaged the city, the parking meter deal, the Skyway deal. All the money the city got from those deals is now gone, and those private companies that paid the city a one-time fee are going to be reaping the benefits from these things for years and years.
And haven't they? Didn't I just read the other day that they've already made it all back?
I think so.
Yeah. So the next 60 years is gravy.
So Rahm Emanuel, I think. Obviously, that's a powerful statement from Bill Cameron. I think Richard M. did do a lot. Obviously, Richard J. built the modern skyline that we see right now.
Expressway system. I mean,
So, but the Lightfoot victory, I don't think I saw it coming back when there was a field of, how many was it, 15 people, or however many people?
I was going to say 25, but I think that's the Democratic primary.
Yeah. Didn't she get 19% of the vote or 17% to be number 1 in the primary? It was
I'm going to go
like,
with 17, I think, yeah.
So 17%, and then I feel, and maybe you would agree with this, that Toni Preckwinkle was hoping that Daley had been her opponent, or another white male. Yeah. And then she could say, elect me as the first black female mayor ever. And when Lightfoot won that primary, Toni Preckwinkle just had her legs cut out from under her.
It really reset everything.
It reset everything. And now you've got machine versus reform. And Lightfoot has no baggage. And I was surprised she won all 50 wards. Were you surprised that she won all 50?
Stunned. Yeah.
She won Toni Preckwinkle's ward, you know? And now we've got a future with Lori Lightfoot, and I can't even begin to guess what's going to happen. I do think she will be more open to the media than Emanuel was, because he was very protective, and he would have his people calling reporters, like Marianne Ahern would tell me over and over from Channel 5, how she would get these phone calls from Rahm's media staff saying, "Oh, that's not a story. You shouldn't be trying to talk her out."
Let me help you rewrite that.
Yeah, let me help you
rewrite it.
And I don't see Lightfoot doing that.
I don't either.
So
no, I mean, I really do think that we're seeing something very different here, because Lightfoot came into office with a different relationship with the media than Rahm Emanuel did.
Right.
Remember, everybody was covering the wedding dress in the
Yes,
basement,
yes,
right?
yes.
And he's not really from
Residency,
Chicago. He's not a
right.
legitimate guy.
Right.
And I wouldn't say that Lori Lightfoot had like a love affair, but she rode to office on the wave of the media one way or another. So I think she's going to be a little bit more open to it. Well,
Yeah.
I mean, she did this show 3 times. You
She
know,
did.
So yeah, that just
And
goes to
do you
show
know that Lori Lightfoot has been on with Mancow? I would say at least 3 times
Has she?
on WLS.
Yeah.
WLS. I think once she might have been on the morning after she won the election. I'm pretty sure she was on.
her people are really media savvy.
Yeah.
And I think that's going to make a big
And
difference.
Mancow has always treated her with respect,
Yeah,
and she
yeah.
treated him with respect.
That's
so,
interesting. That's very interesting. Yeah.
So.
Yeah. John, we just, we knew from the beginning we only had 18 minutes, and we spent a lot of time talking about nostalgia. But
Well,
hey, that's cool, right?
No, I thank you for hiring me at WBEZ back in '85 and for contributing everything you've contributed
Thanks.
to the cause of journalism in Chicago and information and making sure that we know what's going on in the city. I just feel like that and carpentry. You've dedicated your life to those 2 things.
Yes.
You know?
And gardening.
And
yeah.
gardening.
Well, thank you, John.
Thank you, Ken.
Thanks so much. I appreciate it, and good luck to you.
Congratulations on a
Thanks.
successful
All
tenure.
right, we'll be in touch.
Thank you.
All right, thanks. And our thanks to John Dempsey for dropping by to just say goodbye to us here on Chicago Newsroom. And a great round of thanks to all of these people who made this show possible over the years. Jim is our director. Carrie left a while ago, but came back today just to stand here. And we got Kenny, who's been working with us from the very first show. There's Chris and Louis, also from the first show. Dave joined us a little while ago. We've got Eric and Andrea over there, who are newer with the show. And I think we got everybody except for Rob, who has been the producer for the whole thing all this time. And Louis is off somewhere. Yes, there he is. Yeah, okay. Did we get you? All right. Thank you all to everybody here. And as they say in show business, that's all for now. Lights out.